Hi, my name is Lynette Cashaw-Davis. I'm a person in long-term recovery from substance use disorder, which for me means I haven't used drugs or alcohol since May 4th of 2007. So 15 years and a couple of months. And because of that, I'm a wife, I'm a stepmom. I was able to go back to school and get my master's degree. I've been on my job for almost 20 years. I recently got a promotion, and I do a lot of advocacy locally, statewide, and nationally in recovery.
Very cool. Well, thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedule to join us. We really appreciate it. Could you start off by sharing a bit about your childhood?
Sure. Dad was an alcoholic. Of course, when I was young, I didn't know what that word was. I have memories of waking up in the middle of the night with a lot of screaming and yelling and things being thrown and noises, and it was my parents arguing. My mom was trying to beg and plead and cuss and fuss to get my dad to stop drinking or to act like a father, or act like a husband. And so that I grew up that way. I was an only child, and it was a very middle-class household, but because of the addiction in our family, I was very isolated. I was very lonely, and I became very anxious and nervous. That continued throughout my young adult life, my teenage years. I went away to college, but I didn't go too far because I was afraid to go too far. I was, it's one of those things where you want to get away, but you don't want to get away because you haven't really learned to cope with life. And so I went away to school, and because I didn't know how to cope with life, I got involved with using drugs and alcohol in college, like a lot of kids do, but I couldn't get up and go to class. And so eventually I kept, my grade point average was so low, semester after semester, I got expelled. They kicked me out. I was too embarrassed to go home, so I kind of stayed there for a semester or two, and then I got reinstated. I requested to give. So I did go back and graduated by the skin of my teeth, and I just did what lots of 20-somethings do. I was hanging out, going to work. One of the things I remember learning as a kid was, as I said, a middle-class background. My mom worked for the state. My father was a retired Air Force, so he worked for the federal government. Everything looks good on the outside, chaos and confusion on the inside, but to the rest of the world, everything was great. Everything was wonderful. So that's what happened. I kept using. I kept getting in a little trouble, but nothing major because, I was good at putting that mask on, and going to work and looking good and doing all of that for many years until crack happened, essentially. And I was so enamored by it. It hit my community really, really hard. And at the same time, I was involved in dance and theater. In addition to, I had a job at the state. So I was working at the state. I was doing dance and theater at the time. And then I got all up into crack. And the first thing I said was, I'm going to get out of here. So I wanted to leave town. So I quit my job, took my retirement money out, and moved to Atlanta. Thinking I'll get away from this crack thing, right? But of course, we all know no matter where you go, there you are. But my mom got sick. She had gotten cancer. And, she was here alone because, again, my father had passed. And so I ended up having to come back to Ohio and, take care of her. And I came back to take care of her and fell right back in to the crack scene that I had left 3 years earlier. Wow. It was still on and popping, right? So here I was nursing my terminally ill mother and, nursing my crack addiction at the same time. And it was the hardest time in my life ever because I was trying to be there for her during the day, and then at night I would go out and use. And one time I stayed out the whole night, and I remember she had been calling and calling all everybody trying to find me and stuff. And when I came back, one of her friends called me and said, "Don't ever do that." She was worried. I felt like this small.
Yeah.
And because this disease already makes you feel like crap, and you feel this, but the fact that she was dying of cancer, waiting for me to come home, and I'm out in the streets, it was rough. It was rough.
Absolutely. And really, I mean, that just really exemplifies that double life of the outside, trying to portray one thing, and the inside feeling different. Really, that pattern through many years, and really had perfected it. There's those occasional slip ups that things go a little bit too long, or
Right.
hours too long, and whatnot, and yeah, that feeling inside. So what ended up happening that you decided, I want to do something different? This isn't working.
Oh, Aaron, let's see if we can get there. I can get there pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Let's see. So that happened. My mother ended up passing. And because I was an only child, I inherited the house, the cars, the bank account, all of that. And the short version is I smoked all of it up. My intention was to sell the house and move back to Atlanta because I had a great life there. I never made it. I could not leave. The dope man delivers. So I had money. I sold the house. I took the money from the house. I was getting high. I couldn't leave. As a matter of fact, the people who sold the house ended up having to throw all my stuff out on the porch because they gave me 2 weeks to pack up. But remember, my mother had just died. I'm smoking crack daily, dealing with the grief of I was frozen, trying to pack up a house of 30 years of stuff. So it was a mess. So anyway, I had to get a U-Haul. They threw all my stuff in the U-Haul, including my cat and my dog. And I went to Motel 6. I don't know if they still have Motel 6, but Motel 6 at the time took pets. So me and the cat and the dog was Motel 6, and I'm calling the dope man. The cat ran away. The dog got picked up by the pound. They got put to sleep. I kept that U-Haul for 3 months. The U-Haul I was supposed to drive to Georgia and drop off, never made it until I got pulled over by the cops. And they said, you were supposed to return this. And anyway, all my stuff was confiscated, and I never saw it again.
Oh my.
So here I was, jobless, homeless, by now penniless, and nothing. I got a temp job here in Columbus, and got a rooming house on the west side, and just kept slowly building my life back up. I got another job with the state, and I was still using though. Even with my job with the state, I did the interview. I was fabulous, got hired, and payday came, and I was using from Friday to Sunday, weekend after weekend, until I went to a bar. I went to a club. A friend of mine was playing at a bar, and I went with him to see him play, and then he left, and I went to another club and met some guys there, and partied all night. And the guy that I hung out with told me, I'm in recovery. I've been in recovery for 15 months. I'm in 12-step fellowship. And I was like, okay, gee, look at the time. So anyway, long story short, I kept hanging out with him. I went to meetings with him because I knew about 12-step, right? I had gone to Al-Anon. So I was like, sure, I'll support you. Continuing to use, I'd smoke weed, I'm drinking, I'm going to meetings with him. We're going to conventions. I'm in the hotel room drinking and smoking, and I'd come down and party with him. And everybody in the fellowship was happy to see me and friendly and loving. And we were together for about 2.5 years. Of course, people were telling him, you need to leave her alone. Of course, his sponsor was like, you need to leave her alone, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, 2.5 years in, I'm still working at the state. I'm working downtown, across from the State House. I used to park underground, and at lunchtime I'd smoke a joint in my car. Next thing I know, the highway patrol was searching my car. Anyway, they reported it to my employer. My employer happens to be Ohio Mental Health and Addiction Services, of course, of all places, right? They reported it to my employer, and my employer said, there's something called a last chance contract. You can go to treatment or you can resign. And I chose to go to treatment, and that was 15 years and some change. It was like the world opened up because I was educated. I became, I'm an information junkie, so they just had to tell me the information. So I'm not crazy. I have a disease. Duh. The world opened up for me when I learned about the disease of addiction and the things that it makes, the symptoms of the disease and the progression and how you can think everything is okay or you can think whatever. It was amazing. So 4 days after I went to treatment, I went to my first 12-step meeting and said, my name's Lynette, I'm an addict. And it was, of course, these are the same people that I had been seeing before.
Right.
And they loved me and welcomed me just like they had before, and I learned more as I continued working steps, and I had great sponsorship, and I got involved in service. That's one of the things that really, I've always been a doer. When I was a kid, because I used to be a doer to try to fill up that hole, right? I realized that I was doing to fill up. But what I've learned is I'm still a doer, and it's not that I'm trying to fill up. Now I'm just trying to give back. I'm so grateful for everything that I've been through and that I made it through. And so that's why I do the things that I do now. I do. When I say yes, it's because it means something for me. And for many people, it's like, why do you do something? Because it means something, right?
Yeah.
If I'm not doing something that means something, no telling what I'm going to be doing.
Right. Yes, absolutely.
So yeah.
So what are some of the intangible gifts that you've been given in recovery?
This right here, for one, the fact that just at my age, 62, by the way, always grateful to say that I've made it this far, finally being comfortable with who I am and where I'm going with my life. Just the intangibles of being here and always having the opportunity to volunteer. Anything that has to do with recovery in Ohio or Columbus or even nationally now, I'm there.
Absolutely.
I'm there.
Which I'm really glad you mentioned, because I first met you in 2015 in DC at the Facing Addiction.
Yeah.
And it was such a neat experience, and that was really my introduction into any type of advocacy work. And you've done a lot of advocacy work that has really been impactful on different levels. And this is your opinion, you're not speaking for anybody else.
Absolutely.
What do you see as, like, what are some of the things that we need to start doing better, that we really need to take a look at?
That's a great question. And it's only through the evolution of my advocacy and my volunteer work that I have learned that for me, being a Black woman, just equity, issues of equity, racial, gender identity, all of those different communities that we don't think about. In my 12-step fellowship, they have a workshop called Who's Missing from Our Meetings? And I use that concept when I think about recovery and recovery supports. Who's missing? When there's services, whether it's treatment or prevention services or recovery supports, who's missing? And I think we need to start asking that question more. Who's missing? Because we know addiction doesn't discriminate, right? But the rest of the world does. And so I've learned more about, we have to be more mindful of being inclusive. We understand, the many faces of addiction and being inclusive. We understand it, I think, intellectually, but I think many of us who are not from marginalized communities don't think of the fact that they may be privileged in a way that some folks don't get the opportunities that they do, even in active addiction.
Yeah.
And so that's where I am right now, trying to do more around inclusivity. That's the national group that I volunteer with, Recovery Advocacy Project, their inclusivity caucus, and I chair their DEI training subcommittee, and that's what we're focusing on. We're focusing on BIPOC communities, LGBTQ plus communities, people with physical disabilities, people with mental health issues, all of those communities that we don't specifically think about when we're talking about recovery.
Yes.
Yay! So yeah, that's for me. It's just widening the tent.
Absolutely. And that's, I really appreciate how you broke that down, that intellectually a lot of people, and I think a lot of decision makers know that, but it's now putting it into action and really being able to take those next steps. And as we know, recovery is about actions.
Yes.
What are some words of hope that you could share with somebody who is struggling that have spoken to you over the years?
Awesome. Don't give up. And ignore the shame and guilt that you feel, because it's a lie. Even if you've been hearing it and feeling it all your life, it's a lie. Just hang on long enough to hear the truth. That's what I would say.
Beautiful. Well, thank you again. We really appreciate you taking the time, and your story is definitely going to help somebody out there who is struggling.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate it.